So, Palm Sunday, if you haven't got the message. It's Palm Sunday today. It's the start of what we in the Christian calendar call Holy Week. That's the week leading up to Jesus' resurrection, crucifixion, and then resurrection. Let's get them in the right order. If you've been around a few weeks, you will be aware that we have been digging into the truth of the Sermon in the Mount. We're just putting that on pause for today. We're going to move a little bit further into Matthew, and we're going to look at what happened on Palm Sunday and why it is so significant. So up till now in Jesus' ministry, he's been travelling around many, many towns, hasn't he? He has raised a few people from the dead. He's done some other miracles. He's healed the blind, the deaf, the lame, the possessed, as well as feeding thousands and thousands of people with the contents of one lunchbox. He brings really important teaching like the Sermon on the Mount. He meets and eats with the outcast, the despised, the corrupt, those on the edges of society, and he shocks the Pharisees with the authority in which he speaks and teaches. He teaches that God looks at the heart of a person and that your outward public actions are not necessarily what will bring you into the kingdom of heaven. And after Palm Sunday, his mood changes. If you read through the Gospels from Palm Sunday to Good Friday, he predicts his death and resurrection 3 times. He washes his disciples' feet. He tells his friends that one of them is about to betray him. And he talks that to have a relationship with God the Father, you have to go through Jesus the Son. All of this is very different to what people will have grown up with in a Jewish tradition. He talks more about persecution of Christians or those who follow God than he ever has before. And then we have the events of the Last Supper, his arrest in Gethsemane, Peter's denial, Judas's betrayal, and then his crucifixion and burial all unfold to the shock and despair of his closest friends and his family. You can almost feel the dark clouds gathering as we're going to walk through the next 7 days with him as we read these stories through the 4 Gospels. You can sense a shift in the spiritual realms and almost feel the dark powers and dominions rubbing their hands together as they think, we're going to get him. We're going to put an end to Jesus. So what happens on Palm Sunday that brings about this dramatic change of scene? The mood really, really does change. So Palm Sunday is the day when Jesus entered into Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a city in West Asia, and it is the place where all of these events in Holy Week unfold. How Jesus comes into this city tells us a lot about who he is. This part of the story is less about his words and more about his actions, his nature, and his character. But before we read the account of Jesus' entry into the city in the Bible, we're going to watch a video. Now we're going to watch the video together. This is the entrance of another man into a different city at a different time. And you might even say, a whole new world. So that's from the Disney animated version of Aladdin, with the genie voiced by the late and wonderful Robin Williams. I did watch the Will Smith version, but it didn't quite do it for me. I grew up with this version. So Prince Ali, who we see arriving there at the Sultan's palace, whose real name is Aladdin, he was a nothing, a nobody, a street rat. He stole constantly. He was homeless. His company was a faithful and probably flea-ridden monkey called Abu. He had no family and no stability. And through the powers of his new companion, the genie, and the magic carpet, he was crafted into Prince Ali, a wealthy member of a fictitious and distant royal family, so that he might win the hand of Princess Jasmine. Needless to say, he gets rumbled, and it all comes crashing down around him. He was a nothing, a nobody, but his entrance was flamboyant and loud. He came parading his pretend status, showing off all his stuff, his peacocks, his camels, gold servants, and of course, his monkeys. Let's look now at how Jesus, sovereign over all the earth, certainly not a nothing or a nobody, made his entrance into the city, which would witness 7 days later the most pivotal event in all history and all eternity. So I'm going to read this from Matthew chapter 21. If you want to look it up, it is going to appear on the screen. Verses 1 to 11, and I am reading from the New International Version. As they approached Jerusalem, they came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives. Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there with her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away." This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. "Say to daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." The disciples went and did as Jesus had instructed them. They brought the donkey and the colt, and they placed their cloaks on them for Jesus to sit on. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds that went ahead of him and those that followed shouted, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in highest heaven!" When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, "Who is this?" And the crowds answered, "This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." So, how does Jesus arrive into the city? Kids, how does he arrive? On a donkey. I've got a prop. Don't worry, I'm very risk averse. It's not a real donkey. Tess is so disappointed in me. I can see it right now. So, I have borrowed my son's. This is Wonky Donkey from the story by the same name. So there's Wonky Donkey to remind us. I was hoping he would balance it. I'll prop him. There we go. It's a Wonky Donkey. There's a very good book that accompanies the toy. I thoroughly recommend it. So here's Wonky Donkey. So he arrives on a donkey. Donkeys are really special animals in the Bible. I need my runner now. Thanks. So donkeys are really special. Who else can remember stories in the Bible that have donkeys? The guys over there know. Let's see.
Mary
rides into Bethlehem on a donkey, doesn't she? Any other stories with donkeys? Grown-ups might need to help. I can think of at least one. Joe over here.
Balaam and the talking donkey.
Yeah, so Balaam rides his donkey, keeps kicking his donkey, and the donkey goes, "Whoa, hang on, stop it. We're not doing what we should be here." You can read that one. Anything else? Any other donkeys involved? There's a jawbone of a donkey at some point, isn't there? That comes into play. I think that's most of it. But donkeys are really, really special in the Bible. They're pictures of peace and humility, of suffering and of service. They're not elegant or majestic like horses. Someone, I think, prayed this morning that Jesus didn't come on a horse. They're not elegant and majestic like big animals like that. Or doves we see in the Bible. I mean, he wouldn't have ridden in on a dove. There'd have been a few of them, wouldn't there? But they're not graceful like doves. They're working animals, donkeys. They're used to carry heavy loads from place to place. Jesus did not arrange for a huge elephant like we saw in the video, like the genie did for Aladdin. He sat on a donkey. Sitting on that donkey, he wouldn't have been very high up. They're not particularly tall, are they? They're not tall donkeys. So once there was a crowd around him, he would have quite quickly become invisible. Prince Ali was on that huge, huge elephant. Everyone could see him for miles around. So Jesus soon would have been swamped, the visibility of him swamped by the crowds. There was no sumptuous padded seat or saddle on this donkey, no cloth of fine gold in purple, carefully crafted with a royal emblem. His friends put their coats on the back of a donkey. These cloaks, they probably would have been a bit dusty, probably a bit muddy, definitely in need of a good wash in the river. There were no huge flags to indicate Jesus' arrival. No streamers, no confetti cannons, no marching bands, no dancers to add to the occasion. Just branches cut down from the trees nearby and spread on the road in front of him. There's no pomp and ceremony. There's no event coordinators making it all go perfectly. No police to keep the peace. No magic. No genie. very ordinary. And yet, this ordinariness is a paradigm-shifting moment. Our Saviour of the world, the Lamb upon the throne, Jesus, the Son of God, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, humbles himself completely, empties himself of all rights and all royalty, and arrives for the most significant achievement and moment of his life, sat on a pile of grubby coats on a working animal from down the road. Think about when your favourite football team arrive on the pitch. What does that look like? There's cheers. If it's a special event, there might be confetti and cannons and explosions and pyrotechnics. Or what about the opening ceremony to the Paralympics or the Olympics? There's a lot that goes on, isn't there? We went to the opening of the Women's Euros football a couple of years ago, wasn't it? And there was so much pyrotechnics, you couldn't see what was going on because the smoke filled the stadium. We knew there was good stuff going on, but we couldn't see it. What does it look like when film stars and musicians arrive to collect their Oscars, their Grammys and their BAFTAs, their significant achievements? There's a huge red carpet, isn't there? They arrive in fancy cars, they have their photos taken by the paparazzi, and they're interviewed by media journalists. They walk to the stage to collect their awards with standing ovations, celebratory hugs, and victorious slaps on the back. What about when your favourite band or musician takes to the stage in the arena? Smoke, lights, confetti, flashing wristbands. Worldly greatness is loud and grand, and we celebrate achievement and greatness based mostly on people's skill and accomplishment. And none of these are bad things. I truly believe that Jesus loves a good gig, and I believe he cheers along with the rest of us when his team score the winning goal. It's important here that we acknowledge what the disciples and the crowds do when Jesus enters Jerusalem. Their response is to bring what they have to elevate Jesus. And again, we prayed about this in the prayer meeting this morning. Sorry. They lay down what they have to worship him. They lay down their coats, their cloaks. That's their warmth, that's their protection, that's their comfort. They cut down branches. Well, that's their shade. Palm branches, they probably use them as materials to make things. They cut down what they have, and they very physically laid it down in front of Jesus. And they bring their shout. There's no mention of musicians or instruments. There's no choirs or backing tracks. Their worship is not polished. It is not professional. It is not rehearsed. It's honest and probably a bit raw. They bring what they have and they pour it out before Jesus. And it's not organised. It is simply the presence of Jesus that provokes that response of worship from them. And I think this is a really good challenge to us. That when we come into God's presence, when we come and we gather together to worship, is it a habit or routine that gets us going? It's 10:30 on a Sunday morning. Yes, this is what I do. Do we rely on our worship leaders and our meeting leaders to get us going a little bit? Do we make a choice each time to look upon Jesus, his grace, his beauty, his power, and stir up our own spirit to bring him what we have on that day? We're going to go back into a time of sung worship really soon. So let's bring what we have today. Let's stir ourselves and bring what's honest, what's maybe a bit raw, but something that demonstrates quite how worthy Jesus is of our praise and worship. The crowds cry out, say to your daughter Zion, what happens fulfills what is prophesied in Zechariah. Say to daughter Zion, see your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. There's no magic, there's no genie. It's simple and humble. Jesus came to serve and not to be served. After Palm Sunday, we read the story of where he washes his disciples, his friends' feet. He lowers himself to the place of a servant, literally on his knees on a dusty floor, washing and drying equally dusty and probably sweaty feet of his best friends. His talk during Holy Week is much more focused on the times that are coming. He challenges the Pharisees' hypocrisy. He talks about the sorting of sheep and goats, the nature of eternity and what that means for us on earth now. He challenges the disciples, saying that he was hungry, but they didn't feed him. He was thirsty, and they didn't bring him a drink. And they said, "We never saw you hungry or thirsty." And that very famous response of, "Whatever you did for the least of one of these, my brothers and sisters, you did for me." After Palm Sunday, there are no more miracles. I've read all 4 Gospels. There are no more miracles except one, and it only appears in Luke's account. Some of you will remember in the garden in Gethsemane, one of his disciples gets a bit wound up and he takes a sword and he slices off the ear of the servant of the chief priest. Luke is the only person to give the account that Jesus healed the ear. My take on this, Luke was a doctor, a physician. He would want us to know that there isn't the servant of a chief priest bleeding without an ear all over the streets of Jerusalem. But that is the only account of a miracle of healing from Palm Sunday onwards. That's significant because up till then he couldn't help but do miracles everywhere he went, in homes, on the street. He was called from place to place, or he sent word with authority. He was constantly healing, but something has changed here. The focus on Jesus' time left on earth is different now. His bigger purpose of reuniting God's people into a full relationship with God the Father, that now consumes him. He's not here for the immediate relief of suffering, shame, and guilt. His purpose is now the bigger call of this eternal kingdom. He moves the focus away from individuals and widens the view to God's people, his tribes and nations, to all the children of God. The events of I keep saying Psalm Sunday. I did it once when I was preparing and now it's stuck. The events of Palm Sunday are deeply significant. And when we think about King Jesus and his Father's kingdom, Jesus comes not to assert his status on anyone, not to put anyone in their place as he climbs up to lofty heights of a throne far away, far removed from relationship or people. We see how Jesus comes, humble. He doesn't shout or proclaim he is. He doesn't list his accomplishments. He isn't even performing miracles and signs to keep the crowd engaged. He arrives on a donkey, taken from outside someone's house, sat on his mate's coats. No genie, no magic. He came into Jerusalem in a completely different way to how people expected the Messiah to arrive. People maybe imagined his arrival might have been a bit more like Prince Ali. Loud, attention-grabbing, attractive, and exciting. He comes how a friend would come to visit. He comes so that you can accept his hand of invitation, knowing who he truly is. He is Jesus, our King, riding on a donkey. And I wonder today, for some of you, if today is the time that God is walking towards you, that he is coming to you. He is this humble, gentle person walking towards you. He is the King of love and the champion of heaven. And is this time in your life your time to approach the King and to make your decision for him to be the Lord of your life and your Saviour?